You are listening to a Pleasure podcast. For more from our Sex Podcast Collective, visit pleasurepodcasts.com.
Welcome back to Private Parts Unknown, a podcast about love and sexuality around the world. I'm Courtney Kosak, and today, Privates, we are loud and proud about the whole spectrum of sexuality. Happy Pride to all of our LGBTQIA listeners. I am happy to announce that I have special programming all month long to celebrate Pride. And today I'm thrilled because we have our first ever episode about the A in LGBTQIA, which of course stands for asexuality. And I have definitely had some requests for an episode on this topic. And we have the perfect guest to educate us about asexuality, Cody Daigle-Orians, aka Ace Dad Advice. And I have to say, this is a fascinating conversation about Cody discovering their asexuality later in life after initially coming out as gay. Cody also explains the nuances of asexuality and attraction in general, including the differences between sexual, romantic, and even aesthetic attraction. They also share how their asexuality journey led them to rethink their gender identity as well, how polyamory fits into the equation, and Cody provides tips for navigating mixed identity relationships. There is so much good stuff in this episode, so without further ado, let's get into it.
Hi, my name is Cody Daigle-Orians. I am an asexuality educator and writer.
Well, I'm thrilled to have you here. So from what I understand, you started a TikTok and now you have a book called Ace Dad Advice. So I would love to hear about how you became an Ace author and influencer.
Yeah, it was like totally by accident. At the insistence of my barber 3 years ago, I downloaded TikTok. He was like, yeah, get on TikTok. It'll be a lot of fun. And I was like, what am I going to do on TikTok? I'm old. Like, that's where the kids are. But I did anyway. And one day, just sort of like playing around with TikTok, I made a video where I identified myself as an ace person. And I was at work. So I went away for a couple of hours and came back to like hundreds of comments and all these new followers with people saying things like, wow, I didn't know ace adults existed. I didn't know like there were ace elders. I've never seen an ace person who looks like you. And that was like a really impactful moment for me.
Yeah.
I know how important queer elders are for me as like I've been queer since I was 18. So like I know how important elders are. And it just spoke to me like there was maybe a space in the community for someone who looks like me to be an encouraging elder. So I started making videos, and that has turned into this entire like journey this life journey and new path that I'm on, which has been very cool.
That is awesome. Yeah, I do feel like asexuality, it's such an had conversation, even on this podcast. And we've had requests in the past, and I've definitely tried to book interviews to speak to this topic, but we've never covered it. And I mean, I feel like this is like the perfect example. It's just like kind of underrepresented. So has that been your experience too?
Oh, for sure. You know, the community is, asexual folks have existed for as long as people have existed, like all
Right.
queer identities. That's very true. But in terms of like asexuality existing as a community and as an identity in the way that we understand it, that's a relatively new thing. Like the Asexual Visibility and Education Network, which is the very first organization that exists to sort of like support and connect ace folks, didn't begin until 2001. So like we're still in the very early stages of articulating ourselves as a community and as an experience for people to hear about it. So yeah, like very early stages. I first came out as gay when I was 18, and that was 1994. I never would have encountered information about asexuality then. So yeah, like it's only now are there ace people who are on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube talking about asexuality and writing about it and being visible, where you could sort of see that experience in the world. That's a relatively new, I don't want to say invention, but it's a relatively new reality.
Yeah, totally. I guess I want to go back. You have such an interesting journey, and I want to definitely talk about that. But first, let's define asexuality?
Yeah, sure. So asexuality is a sexual orientation that describes people who do not or rarely experience sexual attraction. That simple definition really describes a wide range of ways that can be expressed in an individual, in individual's relationship to sex, and an individual's relationship to relationships. So an asexual person could look like a lot of different things.
Yeah.
Some ace folks do not have sex ever in their lives and don't want it as part of their lives or relationships. Some ace folks do. Ace folks relate to sex in a lot of different ways, relate to attraction in a lot of different ways. But the consistent thing that meets sort of all ace folks where they are is either no experience of sexual attraction or a non-normative experience of sexual attraction that usually includes some absence of it.
So, yeah, I guess the attraction piece, it gets conflated so often, the sexuality and the romantic part, and, people being beautiful, and, all the reasons you would be attracted to someone. I don't know if we necessarily parse them out, but can you explain that, how attractions work separately? I didn't even realize this, which is so true, until I was listening to your work and I was like, oh.
Yeah. Well, like, I think we use the word attraction to mean a lot of things. We do this a lot in relationships and sex and love. We just like use a single word to mean a lot of different things. And attraction is one of them. We talk about attraction and mean a lot of different things. We can be attracted to someone sexually. We can be attracted romantically. We can like the way someone looks. We can be attracted to the way someone thinks. Like, there are all these things that we like loop into attraction. And culturally, we expect when we're attracted to someone, all of those things are going to happen at the same time, right? Like, the goal is someone who does it all.
They check all the boxes. Yes.
Right. And that's a very tall order. That's hard to do. The asexual and aromantic communities have come with like a way of understanding attraction that kind of breaks those apart, that says each of those attractions, while they're connected and they're related, they work independently. So one could be aesthetically attracted to someone. I can really like and be attracted to someone because of the way they look, but I may not experience sexual attraction. Or I may be sexually attracted to someone, but I may not be romantically attracted to anyone. And that each of those, they work like sliders on a like when they work like sliders.
Yeah.
Some sliders are up, some are down. They all work independently, but they exist in the same space. And for asexual folks, that sexual attraction slider is either down all the way or only works in certain circumstances.
Yeah. So, okay, going back to your journey. So, as you said, you came out as gay at 18. And that's so interesting because that is what you would have seen in the culture. If you were like, okay, what am I? Like, ace wasn't even really, as you said, on the table at that point. So, how did you go from there to then coming out as ace at 42, I believe?
Yeah. It was a long gap. Yeah. When I came out at 18, the closest thing to that related to my experience, like, I knew I wanted to sort of like have relationships with men, and I thought men were handsome. I was like, okay, so I maybe don't fit all the boxes for gay, but gay seems to be the coat that fits the best. So that's the one we're wearing. And so I spent most of my adult life really kind of understanding myself as a not good gay person. I was like, I often said I was like a bad gay. I understood myself as like failing in performing that identity correctly, which is not like a great way to live. That's not a fun way to, have queer joy. But I got married to my husband, who's like a lovely human being, and he's the one who introduced me to Tumblr. And I'm like playing around on Tumblr. He's like, go explore the queer side of Tumblr. And on Tumblr, I encountered people creating posts where they're talking about asexuality, and not so much in just definitions, but talking about asexuality as they live it, what it looks like in their lives and what it looks like in their bodies and their relationships. And in those posts, I was like, oh, that's what's been going on this whole time. I recognized myself in that. And it was a process of like taking that information and then looking back at my experience and going, oh, I misinterpreted what was going on.
Right.
I wasn't a bad gay. I was just a really good ace person.
Yeah.
And like really good at it. So like that has become this like new phase of my life that I turned 48 in a couple of days. And so like it's been
Happy
6
birthday.
years of Thank you. It's been like 6 years of understanding myself in this newer, correct, more authentic way.
Interesting. Oh my God, I love a Tumblr aha moment where you're
There
like,
are a lot of them for ace folks. It's Tumblr or Reddit. Like those are the two places where we find
you put it all
ourselves.
together. Yeah. Amazing. Okay, so yeah, I want to talk about how that's impacted, your relationship and things like that. But I think let's clear up maybe some misconceptions around asexuality. And that I think is that ace people have sex sometimes, like.
Sometimes, yeah. Yeah, I think like the stereotypical notion of an asexual person kind of imagines us to be almost blank slates. Like I think people think if you're asexual, that means there's no sex, you don't like to touch anyone ever, you don't want to have any relationships, you just want to like sit in your house alone reading a book, which is great. Like that
also sounds
that can
good.
be great.
Yeah.
That sounds great. But there's really a wide range of ways that asexuality can express itself for people in relationships. When you think about sex and sexual attraction is not always necessary for someone to have sex. Like that's
so
for
true.
Even if you're not ace. And a lot of times for ace folks who do include sex in their relationships, it usually has to do with it being a way to express other connections with their partners, it being something they just like physically enjoy, or they just want to like have that as part of their relationship and they're comfortable with it. Whereas ace folks who don't, they just choose not to have that, or that they're like really strong like physical reasons why they don't want to include that. It doesn't feel good. It's not something they're comfortable with.
Yeah. I mean, it made total sense. I at first I was like, oh, interesting. But then I'm like, I have sex a lot. I don't feel like it every time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So you are on Tumblr. You figure out like, okay, I think I'm this ace thing. So how did that affect your marriage? And I understand you're now in a polycule.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm doing all the things.
I love it.
With my husband, it was certainly there was a period where it was really challenging. I think when you are in a relationship, we would have been married for like 3 or 4 years. So when you're in a relationship with someone for a long time and you feel like you really understand them and they bring something very new to the table that reconfigures the way they understand themselves and the way you understand them, like you have to do some renegotiation.
Yeah.
There's like dealing with the challenging feelings of that, any kind of feelings of grief for things you feel you may have lost. And then just figuring out, well, what does our relationship look like now that we know this? So with my husband, there was some challenging parts of that because that's tough terrain to cross for really any kind of couple. But I'm married to a very cool person, so we were able to navigate that and successfully get to the other side of that. And we've now been together for like 10 years. We've been married for 10 years, so like that's great. And yeah, we are both also polyamorous. So
Is that new?
We were poly at the start of our relationship too. Like that was always consensual non-monogamy, and being poly was always part of our relationship. And in the last couple years, I met someone who I wanted to have a very serious relationship with. He met someone that he wanted to have a really serious relationship with. And now we all live in Ohio and we call ourselves the Constellation. That's how we think about our polycule. And there are 4 of us. Not everyone is romantically and sexually connected to each other, but we are a family unit where we make decisions together and think about things and spend time together and plan our futures together. It's cool. Yeah.
I love that. And you're the only ace in the constellation. That's right?
I'm the only ace in the constellation. Yeah. Surrounded by aloes.
So give us some tips for mixed relationships. How do you navigate that?
Well, I mean, and like this is going to ring true for every relationship, but like communication becomes incredibly important. You have to talk about what boundaries look like. You have to talk about what your wants and needs are. You have to talk about what's not feeling great or not feeling comfortable anymore. I am sex favorable, so I do include sex in my relationships, but that's like a shifting relationship. It's not something I'm always down for. It's not something I'm always in a place for. And so it just requires a lot of continual conversation about, well, where are we right now? What's on the table? What's possible? What do we feel comfortable with? What is going to be the things that we can do that express how we feel for each other? That's like the most important. I encounter a lot of ace folks who are comfortable with themselves as ace folks, but feel as though they need to be apologetic about bringing their wants and needs to the table in a relationship or to a potential partner. Mm-hmm. And I think like we don't have to apologize. No one should apologize for the things they want from another person. We should be able to come to the table and say, this is what makes me happy. This is how I experience pleasure. This is how I want to experience that with you. Do we line up here? And like, let's find the place where we can line up on those things. I think like communication becomes the most important thing. Don't be afraid to ask for what you want, and encourage everyone in the relationship to do that talking and do that communicating. Make no assumptions about what's good, what's not, what's wanted, what isn't. Talk about it.
Do you think polyamory makes it easier to navigate?
I think, like, I mean, if you're a polyamorous person, it maybe does, but like, you know, polyamory is hard. Polyamory is challenging in its own ways, right? Like we have to deal with all of the cultural norms around relationships and monogamy that are always putting pressure on us. So like, it's hard. That's challenging enough as it is. I don't think that like an asexual person should see polyamory as a solution to the problem. Like, you don't want to bring another challenging relationship set of issues into a relationship as a solution. Like, if polyamory is a thing you want and everybody feels good about having multiple partners, I mean, yeah, it certainly allows us to explore connections and things that are good for us or that we want to and that we're open to. But I think like, if you're not polyamorous and want to like try it as a solution to navigating an ace-allo relationship, I don't know that that's the best. I don't think that's the best path. That's a whole other set of skills that you need to be good at too.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Hey, privates, here is a question for all the men and the penis owners out there. How much attention do you really give your friend down there? And no, I do not mean that type of attention. I mean intimate care. If the answer is none, I need you to meet our sponsor, Jelk to Grow, because they have a clear mission. It is to help men reconcile with their bodies and improve their confidence. And what is better than improving your confidence? Nothing, honey. That is why they have designed a comprehensive training system for men to work on their intimate health. So whether you're dealing with erectile health, ejaculatory control issues, or size insecurities, their coaching program and routines incorporate techniques like Kegels, vacuum and traction therapy, and mindfulness, all to support you naturally. But that's not all. They have a whole new line of products to enjoy yourself and your body, like their soothing penile balm, an array of penis pumps and masturbators, and also explore the Jelk to Grow Academy for free tutorials on penile exercises to enhance your intimate health. It is all available in the Jelk to Grow Academy. So if you are ready to take the next step in improving your intimate health, our sponsor, Jelk to Grow, is offering our listeners an exclusive 20% off your order. Just enter the code PRIVATE at checkout. Visit Jelk2Grow at jelk2grow.com. That is JELQ, the number 2, GROW, and use code PRIVATE to get 20% off. You can find the link for that in the episode's description. And don't miss out on this great offer to enhance your penile health. Hey, privates! Boo, boo! Privates with penises, I'm talking to you. Our sponsor, Fleshlight, can help you reach new heights with your self-pleasure. And that is because Fleshlight is the #1 selling male sex toy in the world. And they don't just leave you hanging over there. At Fleshlight, you can explore sex toys with expert guides and advice, especially if you're a beginner or you're looking to level up. If you have been listening to the show for a while, you know how I feel about self-pleasure, and it is very, very good. And I definitely endorse using sex toys. I have a lot of fun with sex toys myself. So with the Fleshlight Girls series, you can embrace your wildest porn star fantasies with a different porn actress every night. What? With the variety of models, sensations, and intensities, you can live out limitless fantasies. And you can automate your fantasies with the universal launch that fits most Fleshlight products. With its innovative touch control system, just set the controls, sit back, and enjoy. And you have pleasure right in your hands. Your pleasure is in your complete control. And as the ultimate male pleasure device on the market, it's as versatile as you are. Anatomical, stamina building, vibrating, or made for couples, you name it. You define your luxury moment. And I just want to say, if you have any shame around sex toys, please don't. It is so much better than being weird with girls because you feel kind of desperate or whatever. Fleshlight just allows you to chill out, wait for the right girl when she comes, and in the meantime, you know you are going to be getting yours and having a good time. So you don't even have to sweat it. And right now, Fleshlight is offering Private Parts Unknown listeners 10% off your order with our code PRIVATE10. So you just go to ppupod.com. That's the website, ppupod.com. You click Fleshlight and you use the promo code PRIVATE10 to get 10% off your delicious new device. Again, that is ppupod.com and enter code PRIVATE10. And it really helps support the show. It helps support yourself and your own sex drive. So go ahead and use the link in the episode description. We can all be horny together. We can keep this podcast going. So get yourself a Fleshlight and get yourself off. Okay, let's talk glossary, because I feel like there are so many different terms and I want to get the definitions right. So I guess let's start with gray sexual.
Yeah, so gray sexual folks are people who sometimes experience sexual attraction, sometimes don't. It's in that gray space in between experiencing and not experiencing. It's also a term that gets used by folks who do have an experience of sexual attraction, but it's like really, really low and it's sort of inconsequential for them. So they may experience it, but it's, it's like at 1 on the slider scale. It's not really consequential. Folks will use gray ace to describe that experience as well, but it's in that like middle space between not and experiencing.
Okay. And then demi.
So demisexual is kind of part of the gray ace spectrum. For demisexual folks, their sort of baseline experience is not experiencing sexual attraction. So like just going through the world, that's kind of what experience they're having. But if there is an emotional connection that gets developed with someone, sometimes it has to be like an intense one, or it can be just like a good connection with someone. Then sexual attraction becomes possible for them and they can experience it. So it's one of those situations where there is an experience of sexual attraction, but it's only in a very specific set of circumstances under certain conditions.
Okay, allo.
Allo is everybody who experiences sexual attraction on a regular basis. So straight folks, gay folks, lesbian folks, bi folks, pan folks, everyone who's regularly experiencing sexual attraction kind of like swims in the allo pool.
Where does the word come from? Do you know?
I don't.
Oh, interesting. Okay. And then agender.
So agender is part of it is sometimes considered a non-binary gender identity, but what agender folks don't really feel like they have a gender identity. So they don't feel male, they don't feel female, they don't necessarily feel connected to the notion of a gender identity. That's what agender means.
Did we miss any other big ones?
Maybe the only big that I kind of like normally use I include in the big ones is a term called ace flux. It's an interesting part of the ace spectrum.
I've never heard this.
Ace flux folks have a shifting experience of sexual attraction. So maybe they'll go through periods of not having sexual attraction. They may go through periods of having it, or they may just move around the asexual spectrum like that. Their experience will be in flux and change. I think it's a really cool identity because it sort of speaks to the fluidity of human sexuality and the fluidity of human sexual experience. So like, I love my ace flux folks.
Yeah. Yes, that's the whole other thing. It's like none of these things are necessarily fixed. So, okay, let's talk the gender and the sexuality piece, because you identify as asexual and agender. Is that correct?
Yes.
So can you just explain, obviously gender and sexuality are different, but how these identities?
Yeah, well, so I can certainly talk about like how they sort of interact for me. So I came out as asexual first. That was the journey that I went on first. And as I said earlier, like, you know, it allowed me to like take a look at who I was before and like reconsider how I understood myself through earlier parts of my life. And in that exploration and reconsideration, I was like, you know, there's a lot of things about gender here that I'm not totally vibing on either.
Right.
So I went through this process of like really thinking about, well, okay, so if I misunderstood myself in a sexual orientation context, are there things about gender that I didn't quite understand because there were similar experiences?
Mm-hmm.
I was assigned male at birth. I lived as identifying as male because that's what they told me, but I never felt really good at it. I felt like a bad male person. The experience of being male or like being perceived that way and being considered that way in the world always felt kind of like uncomfortable and not totally correct. And so through the process of like exploring asexuality and then being introduced to a world of ace and aro and non-binary and trans creators that I found myself in once I started making content, it opened up this like way of like asking questions and thinking through my experience. And I was like, you know, I really just like, my check mark would be no when it came to gender. Like if I had my choice at the
Not
like
a
through all
fan.
this, I would say no, thank you. That would be my choice, and that would be the clearest and most authentic way that I've experienced gender is just like not so much.
Yeah.
So so then I started identifying as non-binary and agender, and that has been that's been like that how those two connected. One opened, which is common in a lot of queer experiences. I think
Yeah.
when you take the first leap into queerness and you open yourself up to that kind of questioning and exploring, it makes it easier to like think through other parts of your life that might intersect with queerness in some kind of way. And so that's what happened to me. It was asexuality opened a door to further thinking and led me to realizing I was agender.
You know, my beef with gender is just like, we need to embrace the they across the board. You know, it's like I identify as a woman, but there are so many things about it that would like to opt out. And so I am just like,
Yeah.
I think it would benefit all of us if we just sort of approached it kind of on more of a neutral level. But yeah, whole separate episode.
No, I'm all for opting out. Yeah. Check the no box. Bye. Yeah.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about ASTAT advice, what's in the book, and then I think you have another one coming.
Yeah. So not long after I started making content and it was really becoming a thing, a publisher reached out and said, "Would you be interested in turning your work into a book? Would you at all want to do that?" And I said, "Yeah, absolutely." So the first book is really just like a distillation of what ASTAT advice does in an online sense. It is about creating an educational and empowering space for people who are questioning whether or not asexuality is their reality, and to give like practical advice about how to live your best ace life. And it's written with a young adult audience in mind. It's written for people who are at the beginnings of their asexual journeys, to provide like the best education and the most helpful encouragement that can be there for you, directed at an ace person. And yeah, I have a new book that comes out in October that's kind of like an extension of the first book's work. It's called the Ace and Aro Relationship Guide, and it looks at all the ways that one can form relationships. So we're talking about friendships, romantic relationships, sexual relationships, relationships with our community, relationships with the world, and looks at them through an ace and aro lens, because we never get stuff written for us that specifically talks to like our specific needs and concerns and to us directly. So I wrote that book. It is also aimed at younger readers, so that there's like a resource when you're at the start of your journey and figuring yourself out. Like, you can figure yourself out with the first book, and when you're ready to like start connecting that with other people, you can grab the second book, and it helps you like walk through
Execute.
relationships of all kinds with like the most confidence.
I love that. That's fantastic. Well, congratulations. Huge congratulations. 2 books. That's epic. Do you have any final words of wisdom about asexuality before we wrap?
I think like for people who For people who are unfamiliar with asexuality, when it comes across your path, or if you just want to do some digging, be curious, be open-minded and curious about it. All the things that you think you know about asexuality are probably not true, because the messages that cultures tells us about asexuality are all wrong. Be curious, be open, be kind and generous about thinking about asexuality and finding a place for it. Asexuality is one of the many ways in which human sexuality can express itself in a person. So yeah, approach that with curiosity and kindness and make room for ace folks.
Thank you so much for giving us that primer on asexuality, Cody. That was fabulous. I learned so much, really. And thank you for tuning into this episode of Private Parts Unknown. Stay tuned right here because I have got another sexy episode coming your way next week. We are doing a special month of programming for Pride, so we've got another Pride-related episode, and it's so good. So make sure you check back in for that. And for the latest episodes, look down and make sure you're following us on your favorite podcast player now. To stay in touch between episodes, follow me at Courtney Kosak. That is Kocaak on Instagram and Twitter. And follow the show at Private Parts Unknown on Instagram and at Private Parts Un on Twitter. And hey, baby, I am shamelessly trying to hit the top 1% on OnlyFans, always and forever. So if you are interested in a Playboy-style peek behind the podcast, you can subscribe to my OnlyFans account at onlyfans.com/CocoPeepShow. It is a very horny way to help support the show, and I very much appreciate it. So if you are interested, please join me over on onlyfans.com/CocoPeepShow. Of course, subscribe to our newsletter at privatepartsunknown.substack.com. There's a link in the episode description for that. And subscribe to the Private Parts Unknown YouTube channel for the video version of a bunch of episodes. It's youtube.com/privatepartsunknown. Again, youtube.com/privatepartsunknown. Make sure to subscribe over there because it helps us out in the algorithm. And actually, all of the audio episodes automatically update over there, so you can get the latest audio episodes as well. And check out my other podcast for more of my audio creations. I have The Bleeders about book writing and publishing, and Podcast Bestie, which is a best friend to podcasters trying to grow and monetize their shows. And hey, for any writers in the house, I am doing a very special writing intensive for the month of July. It is called Midsummer Pitch Party. All the details are on my website, so just go to CourtneyKosak.com/teaching. Again, Courtney Kosak, my last name is KOCAK.com/teaching. And I am so excited about this offering, and I hope you join me. So I am offering a discount to all Private Parts Unknown listeners for $100 off with the code PRIVATE. Again, over at CourtneyKosak.com/teaching. And shout out to Amy Rausch for the bomb-ass theme music. For more info about Amy and her music, check out amyrausch.com. That's Amy, RAASCH.com. This episode was mixed by my beloved audio guy, Michael Castaneda of Plastic Audio. And after enjoying this content, could we ask you for a quick favor? Just go to ratethispodcast.com/private and give us a 5-star rating and review. And I'm happy to say that since the last episode, you guys have given us a couple new ratings. We were at 285 for ratings on Apple Podcasts, and we are now up to 287. So thank you to the 2 people who helped out over on Apple Podcasts. And we were at 145 on Spotify, and we are now up to 146. So our goals are actually to get to 290 on Apple Podcasts and 150 on Spotify. So you can help us out with those goals. If you are listening on Spotify, just go to our page. Go to the little hamburger sign, which is those 3 dots. Click those. That'll give you the option to rate the show and give us 5 stars. Voila, you have just made my day. And if you are listening on Apple Podcasts, you can either rate and review directly in the app, or you can go to ratethispodcast.com/private. You can actually go to ratethispodcast.com/private no matter where you are listening. and give us a 5-star rating and review, and it would make my freaking day. I would also read that review on the air. So please help us out. Help us hit those rating and review goals. We are forever grateful. And there is one more way you can help support the show. We are now on the Fountain app. So if you are listening on Fountain or another V4V platform and you get value from this show, you can support us by sending a boostagram or sending some sats for streaming. You can even send a comment along with your boost, and those are my favorite messages to get because they come with a little bit of Bitcoin. And I want to shout out our latest supporter over on Fountain. It is Cousin Vinny, who gave us 473 sats. So thank you so much to Cousin Vinny. We so appreciate you. And thank you so much for sticking with me until the end. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring. Love you, privates.